On Sunday, the president said he was disappointed that President Xi was not going to be attending the G20, but then he said, I'm going to get to see him. What did he mean by that? Has something been scheduled here?
Nothing's been scheduled, but the president has said before that he's looking forward to picking up the conversation that he had with President Xi in Bali last year, and he fully intends to do that in the months ahead. Yeah.
Jake, thanks so much. Can you, just following up on that point, give us a sense of the timing? Do you think that that conversation might take place in the coming weeks, in the coming months?
I can't give you a sense of timing today.
On World Bank reforms, on the one hand, you've talked about it not being about a specific country, that it's not about China. On the other hand, though, you have said that you need an alternative to the, quote, coercive and unsustainable lending through the Belt and Road Initiative. So, I mean, how can it be about China and not be about China at the same time?
Well, we believe that there should be high standard, non-coercive lending options available to low and middle income countries. That's a fact. It's also a fact that World Bank reform is not about China, in no small part because China is a shareholder in the World Bank. So growing the size, relevance, capacity of the World Bank to deliver for low and middle income countries is not against China. It's for the entire international community, all of the shareholders of the World Bank, China being one of them. And we believe that just as the United States would benefit from a more stable, more capable set of low and middle income countries being able to deal with their own problems with help from the World Bank and the IMF, China would benefit from that too.
But there is at least a part of it that is focused on China, on those coercive practices of those reforms.
This is an affirmative agenda. It is an agenda about providing high standards, transparent, sustainable, resilient funding streams to countries that cut through the red tape and give not just the poorest countries in the world, but middle income countries who are dealing with the stresses of climate and COVID and migration and the war in Ukraine, access to capital that they can actually take advantage of and put to work. That's not against anybody. That is not a negative agenda. That is an affirmative agenda, positive agenda, and one that's been embraced not just by the United States, not just by our closest allies, but by a very wide range and diverse set of countries. And we believe it will be embraced by the G20 as a whole when we go to New Delhi.
And if I may just finally, you mentioned China being the third largest shareholder. How does it impact that Xi Jinping won't be at the table when you're asking for these reforms? Does it change the pitch at all, or how does that change with them not being there?
It won't change our pitch. You know, our pitch has been consistent working into the summit. President Biden will reinforce it. China will have representatives at the table, albeit not represented at the leader level, but the United States is going to put forward the same straightforward, in our view, clear-cut case for why this is so important. And more importantly, we'll also put on the table the fact that we are asking the Congress for financing to be able to make sure that the United States is not just talking the talk, but we're actually walking the walk.
Bloomberg colleagues reported that Huawei has reached a breakthrough with its new smartphone that shows it's using the most advanced chips produced by Chinese chip maker SMIC. I'm wondering how concerned you are about this development, and does it prove that the U.S. export controls are failing or that they're violating those export controls?
I'm going to withhold comment on the particular chip in question until we get more information about precisely its character and composition. And from my perspective, though, what it tells us, regardless, is that the United States should continue on its course of a small yard, high fence set of technology restrictions focused narrowly on national security concerns, not on the broader question of commercial decoupling. That is where our emphasis has been. That's where it's going to continue, sort of regardless of the outcome. But in terms of characterizing the chip in question, that's something that we need to gain more information from before we make any definitive comments on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you see the tension between India and China affecting cooperation, especially with the climate issue in the summit, and ultimately affecting the perhaps the results that could be achieved in this summit?
As far as the question of tensions between India and China affecting the summit, really that's up to China. If China wants to come in and play the role of spoiler, of course that option is available to them. What I think the chair, India, will encourage them to do, what we, the United States, and every other member, virtually every other member of the G20 will do, is encourage them to come in a constructive way on climate, on multilateral development bank reform, on debt relief, on technology, and set aside the geopolitical questions and really focus on problem solving and delivering for the developing countries.
Jake, it seems like every administration, when it gets into office, complains about the problems it inherits from the previous administration. But how do you defend this administration's role with issues like Russia, China, North Korea, Iran? It seems like in all of those cases, our relationship is worse than it was before.
Well, first of all, Russia decided to launch a massive land war in Ukraine. The United States has mobilized not just the West, but a coalition of dozens of countries, and more than 140 countries have voted for a UN General Assembly resolution condemning what Russia did. If you look at the U.S. leadership in that regard, we have stopped Russia from being able to take over a sovereign state. We have ensured that Ukraine will continue as a viable, free, sovereign democracy out into the future, in the support we have given to the brave and courageous Ukrainians out there on the front lines. I think the story of how the U.S. has stood up to Russia and galvanized the world to do so is a significant achievement of President Biden and one that we expect to continue. With respect to China, I'm not sure I'd agree with your characterization of the previous administration, but I'm not interested in comparisons. We're taking our own approach on this, which is to ensure that we compete intensively to put the United States in the strongest position possible, while at the same time managing that competition so that it doesn't tip over into conflict. We believe we are managing the competition effectively. And from the question of what we inherited to where we are today, if you look at the U.S. economy and you look at China's economy, if you look at the U.S.'s alliances and the strength that we have built up in the Indo-Pacific and beyond, we feel very good about the strategic position of the United States in terms of the unfolding competition.